You are standing in the gilded halls of the Alcazar of Madrid on a sweltering afternoon in November 1665. The air is thick, not with summer heat, but with the weight of centuries pressing down on stone and flesh alike. Through the heavy doors, you hear breathing. The woman crying out is Queen Mariana of Austria. She is 21 years old. The man waiting outside, pacing the marble floors with the rhythm of a funeral march, is King Philip of Spain, her husband, her uncle, 30 years her senior, and the architect of what is about to emerge. Because what is struggling to enter this world is not simply a child. It is the sum total of 200 years of calculated choices, each one made with absolute certainty, each one bringing the most powerful family in Europe one step closer to creating something that should never have existed. Before we walk further into this palace of shadows, I'd love to know, where are you watching from right now? It amazes me that we're piecing together this forgotten chapter of history together, across continents and centuries, united by our curiosity about what humans are capable of when power becomes obsession. When the infant finally emerges on November 6, 1665, the midwives go silent. Not with joy, with horror. The physicians lean in, and what they see makes them step back. This is Charles II of Spain, the last of the Spanish Habsburgs, and his body is already a confession. His head is grotesquely large. His limbs are thin and twisted, and his face carries the signature that has been growing more pronounced with each generation. The Habsburg jaw, protruding so far forward that his mouth cannot close, his teeth cannot meet, his tongue lolls uncontrollably. He is not a child. He is evidence. To understand how this moment became inevitable, you have to go back. Back to when the Habsburgs were not cautionary tales but conquerors. Back to the late 1400s, when Emperor Maximilian III had looked at the map of Europe and made a decision that would echo through bloodlines for centuries. He understood something that would become the family's unofficial doctrine. Bella gerant alii, tu Felix Austria nube, let others wage war, you, happy Austria, marry. Marriage was not romance, it was accumulation, power through bloodlines, wealth through inheritance, and, crucially, keeping it all in the family. The strategy worked with terrifying efficiency. Through meticulously arranged marriages, the Habsburgs came to rule Spain, Austria, the Netherlands, parts of Italy, vast territories in the Americas. By the time Charles V ascended in 1519, the sun never set on Habsburg lands. They had won Europe not with swords, but with wedding vows. But there was a price being paid in silence, in the private chambers, in the bodies of children born from unions that should never have happened. Charles V was the product of first cousins. His son, Philip II, took the strategy further, married 4 times, but his 4th marriage set the template for disaster. In 1570, at age 43, he married his 20-year-old niece, Anna of Austria. She was not just his niece. She was his first cousin once removed. Their family tree didn't branch. It circled back on itself like a serpent eating its tail. Their son, Philip III, was born in 1578, carrying an invisible burden, an inbreeding coefficient already elevated beyond what nature could safely tolerate. But the Habsburgs did not stop. They doubled down. Philip III married Margaret of Austria, his first cousin and his sister-in-law's sister. The mathematics of their relationship is dizzying. They were connected through so many lines of descent that their children inherited not a mix of genes, but a concentration. The same genetic material, over and over, amplifying every weakness, expressing every hidden flaw. Their son, Philip IV, was born in 1605 with the Habsburg jaw clearly visible, but he could still speak, still function, still rule. He would be the last. In 1649, Philip IV made the final, fatal choice. At age 44, he married 15-year-old Mariana of Austria, his niece, the daughter of his sister. Originally, she had been betrothed to his son, but when the son died, the family simply reassigned her to the father. The age difference didn't matter. The moral implications didn't matter. What mattered was purity, keeping Habsburg blood undiluted, keeping power concentrated. What they didn't understand, what they couldn't understand, because genetics wouldn't be discovered for another 200 years, was that they were building a bomb. Mariana tried. She gave birth multiple times. Most of the children died within days. One son, Philip Prospero, survived to age 4. Court records describe a child who couldn't walk properly, who spoke in fragments, who suffered seizures that left him unconscious for hours. When he died in 1661, the Spanish court was left with a single, desperate hope, that Mariana could produce one more son, one more heir, one more chance. She did. And that is how we return to November 1665, to the suffocating air of that delivery room, to the moment when Charles II entered the world already defeated by it. Modern genetic analysis has calculated his inbreeding coefficient, 0.254. To put that in perspective, that number is higher than if his parents had been full siblings. He was more inbred than a child of incest. He was the living endpoint of an experiment in genetic purity that had become genetic catastrophe. The court tried to hide it. Official portraits were carefully composed, showing Charles from angles that minimized his deformities. Ceremonies were choreographed so he could sit, so his speech wouldn't be required, so foreign ambassadors wouldn't see him drool uncontrollably or make the incomprehensible sounds that were his attempts at language. But whispers spread. The mad king of Spain, the cursed child, the monster born to a queen. Charles didn't speak his first words until he was 4 years old. He didn't walk without assistance until he was 8. His jaw protruded so dramatically that he couldn't chew solid food. His tongue was too large for his mouth. He could only consume broths and liquids, and even those he often choked on. His immune system was so compromised that common illnesses nearly killed him repeatedly. His mental development was so delayed that he never learned to read or write fluently. And yet, this was the King of Spain. This was the heir to the largest empire on earth. At 14, they married him to Marie-Louise d'Orléans, a French princess, young and healthy and utterly unprepared for what awaited her. Her letters home are heartbreaking. She described Charles as more dead than alive. She wrote about his constant drooling, his seizures, his inability to hold conversations. She wrote with growing despair about the certainty that he would never be able to father children. She lived in that impossible marriage for 10 years before dying suddenly at 26, possibly from poison, possibly from the psychological and physical strain of life beside a man who should never have been born. They tried again. A second marriage to Maria Anna of Neuburg, another desperate attempt to produce an heir. But Charles's body, destroyed by generations of genetic compression, was incapable. His reproductive organs were underdeveloped. His mental state was deteriorating. He became convinced he was cursed, spending fortunes on exorcists. He would stand for hours before religious relics, praying for divine intervention to cure what no god could fix. What his ancestors had done could not be undone by prayer. The Spanish Empire, meanwhile, crumbled. Without strong leadership, without clear direction, it hemorrhaged territory and prestige. Foreign powers circled like vultures. Everyone knew what was coming. Charles II could not produce an heir. His death would trigger a war for the Spanish succession that would reshape Europe. And Charles knew it. Despite his limited mental capacity, he understood that he was the last. That with him, the Habsburg line would die. And that knowledge became another layer of his torture. He aged rapidly. By his 20s, he looked 60. His hair went gray, his skin took on a corpse-like pallor, his already frail body grew weaker. The seizures increased in frequency and severity. After each one, he would lie unconscious for days, and the court would hold its breath, wondering if this was the end. Foreign ambassadors maintained constant watch, ready to alert their governments the moment the king died. Armies were positioned. Alliances were formed. The War of the Spanish Succession was not a possibility. It was scheduled, waiting only for Charles to stop breathing. He lasted 38 years. 38 years of pain, isolation, confusion, and the constant knowledge that he was a disappointment, that his body was wrong, that he was a living monument to failure. On November 1st, 1700, he finally died, alone except for servants, his wife having long since withdrawn. His last words were unintelligible. Even in death, he could not speak clearly. The autopsy revealed what physicians described as putrefied and corrupted organs, though they lack the knowledge to understand that this was genetic collapse made flesh. His brain was smaller than normal. His digestive system was malformed. His heart was the size of a peppercorn. His body was a catalog of what happens when bloodlines fold in on themselves for too long, when purity becomes poison. With his death, the Spanish Habsburg line ended. The War of the Spanish Succession erupted within days, raging for 13 years and costing hundreds of thousands of lives. The empire that had once ruled half the world was carved up by foreign powers. And the genetic experiment that had begun with such confidence, such certainty in the superiority of pure blood, ended in extinction. But Charles II's real legacy is not political. It's biological. It's the lesson written in his twisted bones and undersized brain. Other royal families, watching the Habsburg collapse, began to change their marriage practices. The extreme inbreeding that had characterized European nobility for centuries started to decline, slowly, reluctantly. But the warning was clear. This is what happens when power thinks it can improve on nature. Queen Mariana lived to see her son's death. She had spent 35 years trying to cure him, to hide him, to protect him from a world that stared at him with horror and pity. She had consulted physicians, priests, exorcists, anyone who promised hope, and, in the end, she watched him die without children, without legacy, without even the dignity of a body that functioned as a human body should. The Alcazar where Charles was born still stands in Madrid. The rooms where he suffered through his brief, painful life are now tourist attractions. People walk through them without knowing that these walls witness the final act of a dynasty's long suicide. That in these corridors, Europe learned what happens when bloodline purity becomes more important than the children who must live inside those bloodlines, because Charles II was not born cursed. He was born calculated. Every marriage, every careful,